correspondent Bob Agnew with that report.
3 House panels are hearing from George Kent. He's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. His duties include U.S. diplomacy with Ukraine, a central focus in the ongoing House investigation. Kent is the 4th witness to appear before the House Foreign Affairs, Intelligence, and Oversight Committees. President Trump and many House and Senate Republicans are crying foul over the lack of transparency. They're calling on Democrats to make the hearings public and release the transcripts. Bob Agnew reporting.
Meanwhile, multiple sources are reporting that the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has announced that he will not comply with the September 30th House subpoena for documents related to his work in Ukraine. Also at SRNnews.com, National Security Council member Victoria Coates says the United States is concerned about Turkey's plans in northern Syria, where its forces have attacked the Kurds. Coates says President Trump did not give a green light to Turkey to invade northern Syria.
Across the board, the administration has been unified in conveying to our Turkish counterparts that this is a terrible idea. Nothing good could come of it. We did not in any way endorse it.
Coates was interviewed on the Salem radio network. European Union officials were hoping that after more than 3 years of false starts and sudden reversals, a Brexit deal with Britain might be in sight. Even though many questions remain, diplomats made it clear that both sides were within touching distance of a deal for the first time since a UK withdrawal plan fell apart in the British House of Commons back in March. Britain's scheduled to leave the EU at the end of the month. On Wall Street, the Dow had 248 points and the Nasdaq is up 100. This is SRN News. Evangelicals are blasting the latest season of 13 Reasons Why. SRN's Michael Harrington reports.
The Netflix show got a lot of attention for a graphic depiction of teen suicide in Season 1. And Christian reviewers say Season 3, which just dropped, isn't any better. The American Family Association reports that Season 3 includes multiple pornographic scenes, depiction of teenage drug use, and 2 more characters contemplating suicide. The AFA is urging Christians to petition Netflix for the removal of all 3 seasons of 13 Reasons Why. Michael Harrington, SRN News.
Thousands of people have protested against anti-Semitism in Berlin over the weekend, days after a man attacked a synagogue in the eastern German city of Halle. About 10,000 people participated in the march through the German capital. Several thousands others protested in other cities, including Hamburg and Marburg. This is SRN News. NASA has moved up the first all-female spacewalk to this week because of a power system failure at the International Space Station.
The first all-female spacewalk has been moved up a few days since a battery-powered controller failed over the weekend. Astronauts Christina Cook and Jessica Meir will now venture out Thursday or Friday instead of next Monday. The women will replace the broken component rather than install new batteries, which was their original job. This marks the first ever spacewalk by only women in more than 50 years of spacewalking. I'm Shelley Adler.
A Michigan judge has blocked the state's weeks-old ban on flavored e-cigarettes, citing evidence that adults could return to smoking more harmful tobacco products. The lawsuit was filed by vaping businesses. It had prohibited the sale of flavored nicotine vaping products, including to adults. More details at srnnews.com. I'm John Scott.
Let's get it started in here.
The viewpoints of J. Michael McCoy, his co-hosts, guests, and callers are not necessarily those of any particular religion or denomination. They may or may not be the views of Webcast One Live, the cleaning guy, the woman who brings in cookies, the parking valet, the staff of The View from a Pew, Jill King, Lucinda, the graphic design lady, Justin, Bob, Brian, Linda, or anyone else of sound mind or questionable mental capacity. Should you be offended, provoked, triggered, intimidated, shocked, confused, or inspired to think independently, call our studio lines at 515-442-KPOG and join the conversation. After all, it's your voice we want to hear. Now, live from the Jordan Crossing Studios, here's your host,
Frank the Verse Thomas.
Well, thank you. It is Frank the Verse Thomas here at View from the Pew. And I'd like to invite you to call in, text in, if you have any comments, if you have anything you'd like to share, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. As you know, we do our show, View from the Pew, here Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. every day at Jordan Crossing Church. And if you would like to call the show, text the show, you can do so by following these simple set of instructions.
We want to hear from you, so give us a call on the Service Legends Talk and Text line, 515-442-5764. That's 515-442-KPOG.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit today, and I don't know, talking to some Adventists out there, and I'm even talking to non-Adventists. I really at this point don't really care one way or the other. Some people may think it, I don't know, maybe he's airing a little dirty laundry. Again, I don't see it that way, and so I don't care. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is under attack. See if I can find this article. I want to share this article with you. If I can find it here real quick. I mean, it's not an article, but this is, I don't know if this is the most recent example, but it's an example. In the, if y'all remember, and I think I talked to you about this before, but you all remember the name Morgan Spurlock. Morgan Spurlock was let me pop him up here, and let me tell you a little about Morgan. Morgan Spurlock is a documentary filmmaker, humorist, television producer, screenwriter, and playwright. Morgan's claim to fame, as far as any focus I ever had on him, was something called Super Size Me. And Super Size Me was a 2004 American documentary directed by Morgan Spurlock, an American independent filmmaker. Spurlock's film follows a 30-day period from February 1st to March 2nd, 2003, during which he only ate McDonald's food. That's it. That's all he ate for 30 days. Spurlock ate at McDonald's restaurants 3 times a day, eating every item on the chain menu at least once. Spurlock consumed an average of 20.9 megajoules, or 5,000 calories, the equivalent of 9.26 Big Macs per day during the experiment. An intake of around 2,500 calories within a healthy, balanced diet is more generally recommended for a man to maintain his weight. As a result, the then 32-year-old Spurlock gained 11.1 kilograms, 24 pounds, a 13% body mass increase, and increased his cholesterol to 230 mg/dL. He experienced mood swings, sexual dysfunction, a fat accumulation in his liver, and it took Spurlock 14 months to lose all the weight he'd gained from his experiment using a vegan diet supervised by his then girlfriend, a chef who specialized in gourmet vegan dishes. The reason for Spurlock's investigation was the increasing spread of obesity through the United States society, which the Surgeon General has declared an epidemic. The corresponding lawsuit brought against McDonald's on behalf of 2 overweight girls who was alleged became obese as a result of eating McDonald's food. Spurlock argued that although the lawsuit against McDonald's failed, so he was just out there to see what would happen. Now, and the budget for this little deal was $65,000, and the box office for the I don't know if it's a documentary film, it made $22 million. As the film begins, Spurlock is in physically above average shape, according to his personal trainer. He's seen by 3 physicians, a cardiologist, a gastroenterologist, and a general practitioner, as well as a nutritionist and a personal trainer. So they all predict the diet will have an unwelcome effect on his body, but none expect anything too drastic, citing one human body as being extremely adaptable. Spurlock is 6'2", had a body weight of 185 pounds when he started. So obviously he eats 3 times per day at McDonald's, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He consumes every item on the menu at least once over the course of the 30 days. He must ingest only items that are offered on the menu, including bottled water. He must supersize the meal when offered. And he will attempt to walk about as much as the average United States citizen. So you can see, just laying this out before I even start, that it's a recipe for a disaster. I mean, the same thing would happen, and we're not picking on McDonald's. Same thing could happen at Wendy's. The same thing could happen at Burger King. The same thing could happen, Chick-fil-A. Same thing at Subway. You could literally reproduce this result at about any fast food chain you wanted to attempt this at. So I don't want to, any way, shape, or form, slam McDonald's. In life, you get what you pay for. And but this is not. This is strictly eating McDonald's food 3 times a day for 30 days. Now, if you ate 3 times a day of any restaurant's food and that's all you consumed, I'm going to tell you, you'd be sick of the food in about a week. Anybody that works at McDonald's, you might see them over at Burger King. Anybody that works at Burger King, you might see them over at McDonald's, and vice versa. Whatever fast food, if you work at Pizza Hut, you get tired of Pizza Hut. You get tired of whatever. Nobody wants to eat the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. All right, so you would realize that this is a recipe for a disaster. Well, it turned out to be. Obviously, you saw the things that he gained. He gained 24 pounds. He increased his body mass, his cholesterol levels. He experienced mood swings, sexual dysfunction, fat on his liver. It took him 14 months to lose the weight he gained. All right. And I think Morgan Spurlock done some other things, and I don't remember them all. But I think it kind of spurred some other type. I'm going to do this for 30 days. So in the vein of this, here's a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. Let me look up just one other guy, because I want to get this guy. I want to also speak about this guy and see if I can find this guy also. Okay, here's the guy. All right. Well, that's not letting me have that. Let me see. Try that again. Now, let me see if I can find another one. These are all unavailable. Let me try this. Okay. All right. Here's the one I'm thinking of. Okay. Pardon me. Let me see. Okay. All right. I'm pretty sure this is the guy. All right. So here's just a couple of people that I'm aware of, and I'm aware of one particular because I have a specific reason that I am aware of this guy. But here's a story, just a quick story of Ryan J. Bell. He's born in actually September 26th, day after my birthday, 1971. He's an American former Seventh-day Adventist pastor who became an atheist after spending a year without God as an experiment. Okay? So, now I don't know if this was spawned by Morgan Spurlock's deal. Okay, so it is. He's a former pastor who spent 2014 living as an atheist. So this is something, relatively new. It's 5 years ago. Morgan Spurlock done this Supersize Me back in 2003. So there were some people going around, and they were, for lack of a better word, mimicking Morgan Spurlock, and there was a lot of kind of follow-up programs that come on, hey, do this for 30 days, hey, live like this, blah-de, 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 blah-de. So in 2014, Ryan J. Bell is a Seventh-day Adventist pastor who became an atheist after spending a year without God. He publicly spoke about his experiences before, during, and after the year, and he spoke about it in his blog, A Year Without God, later hosted by Pantheos. He was born in Parma, Ohio, spent his childhood in Loma Linda, California, largely populated by Seventh-day Adventists. Growing up, Bell was strictly religious. He was baptized when he was 9 years old. Not long after that, his parents divorced, and he moved in with his mother. Bell lived with his grandparents, who were very faithful traditional Adventists. They had a great effect on Bell, and he became very conservative in his faith. So kind of a traditional Adventist, got baptized at 9 years old, which I think is a little early. Bell started his career. He did not follow the Adventist laws to the letter. He learned his makeup. He learned that some of his congregation wore makeup and jewelry. Some smoked. All went against what Bell believed a true Adventist should be. Bell became a little liberal in his views and opened a church to those who were not sure about organized religion. He became an advocate for social justice, speaking for gay rights and marriage equality. 2010, he worked in a Hollywood Adventist church, which there was your first mistake. That's not going to certainly be in the Bible Belt conservative area. So you will find that these coastal churches, particularly the West Coast, the South Coast, and the East Coast churches, generally tend to be a little bit more liberal than your Bible Belt churches. So I'm not going to get a big deal into this guy, but I just want to say something here. You're having issues doubting God. He clearly had issues doubting God before he became a pastor. His parents got a divorce, and a lot of times that's a very traumatic situation in a child's life. And if they can't see the two people they love, if a child can't see the two people they love the most on this earth rectify their marriage, a lot of times that just devastates the child. Sometimes a child might say, well, I was praying for my mom and dad, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. And that can destroy a young man or a young woman's faith. Apparently, I'm not blaming everything on the divorce. He did, it looks like he served under Doug Batchelor, done some ministry work alongside Batchelor. But don't be surprised if you live in a cesspool for a year that you're going to come out smelling like a bag of poo. I mean, I don't mean to be blunt, but it's what's going to happen. You crawl around in the slime, you're going to smell a little slimy. You eat McDonald's for 30 days, surprise, surprise, you're going to get fat. Live as an atheist for a year, it's no shock you become an atheist, because he was likely borderline atheist anyway, and he was trying to convince himself in the pastorhood to convince himself that he wasn't. Now I want to tell you the case of about a guy named Mark Martin. And I was trying to look this up, and several of the websites, amazingly enough, you can't find them. But here's a guy, Mark Martin. He's a pastor at, senior pastor at Calvary Community Church in Phoenix, Arizona. So I was at another radio platform, and I called into a radio show, Dr. Michael Brown. And Dr. Michael Brown, I think, may be currently a Messianic Jew. I think once upon a time he was a Calvinist or subscribed to Calvinism. And so I was sitting in the radio studio one day, and I hang on here, I need to mute something. I'm bringing up the video. I think at the time I was, I must have been 58, 59. Dr. Brown cut this clip out of his radio show, posted it on his own Facebook page, and he put a clip on YouTube. This clip is 10 minutes and I believe 10 minutes and 30 seconds long. I'm not playing it, but it's Dr. Brown debates a Seventh-day Adventist on the Sabbath. Dr. Brown speaks with a committed lifelong Seventh-day Adventist about mandatory Seventh-day Sabbath observance. So far, this was recorded on January the 6th, 2016. Since then, it's got 67,655 views. It has 739 likes and 51 dislikes. And it has garnered 1,720 comments. During the time that I recorded this, it was kind of a week where Dr. Brown was on, I don't want to say bash the Seventh-day Adventist Church kick, but he was kind of questioning Seventh-day Adventist doctrine. And I responded to this of a call of someone who was saying that it kind of seemed like that it was trying to deal with this video here. Kind of seemed a little bit like he was on a SDA tirade, for lack of a better word. And so I called in, and the caller before me had argued that, well, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they think they're the elite group. They're the only ones that go into heaven. And I wanted to call in. I wanted to defend my faith. And I didn't know how much time I have, because if you get on a talk radio show, you never know. So you've got some things you want to say, and you say them, and you try to get in what you can say. And he had a break to go to, and he brought me back after the break. And so anyway, when he posted the post, not too long after the post was up, and I was aware it was up, I started noticing that I was getting some troll-like behavior on the post, and some guy named Jeff Glock, started posting a lot of stuff about Ellen White being false prophet, etc., 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 to which I would log on. I say, well, hey, since I was the caller, I guess I'm the best one to talk to, because I'm the caller. And so we went around and around a little bit, back and forth on messaging, and I think maybe I even invited him as a friend on my Facebook page, and we went back and forth on Facebook a little bit. And then I had a friend, my good atheist friend, Chris John. He even volunteered to get in and debate the guy a little bit, and kind of looked up some things and found out who this person was. Well, he was arguing that there's a pastor down in Arizona named Mark Martin. Now, the reason why Mark Martin perks up my ears is because as a NASCAR fan for a number of years, Mark Martin was a professional race car driver, and a guy whose career I followed and enjoyed him winning races. But this Mark Martin was an ex-SDA pastor, and this guy, he didn't have no arguments. You couldn't. All he knew was post, she's a false prophet. You couldn't engage him in a conversation. If you wanted to debate him a point at a time, or get him to try to debate something and argue an issue out, debate an issue out, all he could do was keep posting these negative comments. And I said, after a while, I said, Bud, go troll somebody else. I'm a little tired of debating you. Go find somebody else to troll. And in fact, I seen his name pop up a couple of times on some other SDA style YouTube posts, and he was doing the same thing to some other SDA posts. So it wasn't just me. But we was misled as Seventh-day Adventists, the normal yada, 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 yada spill. All right. So the reason I'm bringing this up is there are a number of so-called ex-Seventh-day Adventist pastors out there promoting the SDA Church as a cult, as a Ellen White's a false prophet, that whatever, we drink Kool-Aid, we're delusional, whatever. Now, as a lifelong Seventh-day Adventist, well, I shouldn't say Seventh-day Adventist, but born into the Adventist faith, going to Seventh-day Adventist church school, trying to attend Seventh-day Adventist boarding academy, I know about as much out there about Seventh-day Adventist church as anybody. Okay? I've never drank Kool-Aid to study Ellen White. Nobody's ever forced me to drink Kool-Aid. In the Seventh-day Adventist church, we don't wear funny underwear. We don't have secret handshakes. We don't have a closed community. Our communions are open. Anybody that wants to come in and see what the Seventh-day Adventist Church is all about can walk in the door and see what the Seventh-day Adventist Church is all about. And trust me, there are plants and wolves in the Seventh-day Adventist Church as I speak. There's wolves in sheep's clothing. There's spies within the doors of the Seventh-day Adventist Church seeing what's going on in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We have nothing to hide. You are free to participate in the Bible study, the quarterly. You're free to read whatever you want of Ellen White. It's not mandatory reading. It's not forced reading. No one forces you to attend a Seventh-day Adventist church school, a Seventh-day Adventist academy, or a Seventh-day Adventist college. You are not coerced, forced, mandated to do anything. Now, I know a closed community church in town. I live close to one. I have a cousin who's a real good friend of this of somebody in the organization that was part black. This community's gated. You're not in at a certain time, you don't get in. When the gates open, the cars file in, boom, 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 and they shut the gate. You are in this church by invite only. This kid was a biracial kid that my cousin knew, and he told me that they sent this kid to somewhere overseas. I don't want to say Africa. I don't want to say something really ridiculous, but they sent him overseas for an arranged marriage of someone of their same faith that was racial like him, and this marriage was arranged. That's how closed net their community is. I've been in this Adventist church 62 years. I've never witnessed anything like that in the doors of this church. We have open communion. You can't take communion if you're not a Catholic. There's other organizations that their communions aren't open. Our communion is open. If you want to participate, you can. If you don't want to. We also go along with the ordinance of humility, which is the foot washing ordinance. You're free to share in anything. Nothing is behind closed doors. Nothing is hidden. So there's an argument out there by many of these quote-unquote so-called apostate Seventh-day Adventist ministers that somehow there's secret things that these people know that Ellen White has written that nobody else knows. Oh, wait a minute. I don't mean to laugh there, but anything Ellen White has written, you're free to read, friend. In fact, her books have been canvassed, sold, for those of you in Rio Linda, by literature evangelists, missionary colporteurs, whatever you want to call them. Her books has been sold in this city. Many doctors' offices, dental offices, buy the children's books for things to read out in the lobby while someone's waiting for their dental appointment, and set after set of Ellen White's writings have been sold in this city, been sold in the United States, been sold in the world. We're a church of roughly 18 million members worldwide. But we are in, I believe, 220 plus countries in the world, and there's only one church that has that presence in the world, and that's the Catholic Church. It's the only church that's in a few more countries than the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but they, I want you to keep in mind, are 1 billion members. Pound for pound, with the people we have, our ministry and our gospel is in only behind the Catholic Church in the number of countries that our ministry has a presence in. We're not a secret society, and we're not a secret organization. If you don't believe it, come to any Seventh-day Adventist church on any Sabbath and walk in the door and sit down and worship. Nothing's going to be hidden from you. But the problem is Ellen White prophesied much of this falling away, much of this falling out. And it's for a reason, and it's because the master's delay would be delayed. There's several parables in the Bible one particular, the 5 foolish virgins and the 5 wise virgins, the workers in the vineyard. There's a number of parables, 3, 4, possibly 5, that all talk about the master's delay, or the master's coming being delayed. The Bible tells us this. And there's nothing more deflating than getting pumped up as any Christian and expecting. In 1975, I sat in an evangelistic series at our first church in Des Moines. And when I walked out the door that night, I was convinced that I was going to see Christ come within 25 years. I just felt like it was that close. And now it's 19 years after I expected him to come. Do I expect Christ to come any less? Absolutely not. Have I been disappointed? Have I been down? Have I been depressed? Yes. Have I ever doubted God? Have I ever doubted Ellen White? Have I ever doubted the Seventh-day Adventist message? No. Never one time in my life have I doubted the Seventh-day Adventist message. Now, let me get over here on the computer because Jill says, I hear you, but I don't see you. So let me get on this other computer, Jill, so you can see my lovely face. I'm over at the soundboard. I think I will be moving soon. There's a little bit of a delay. Here I am. Voila, Jill. I was spending a little bit of time over at the board. Apologize for that, for those of you on Facebook who's wanting to see this wildly exciting face. But when you get pumped up to see the Lord come, like the Millerites did in 1844, it's called the Great Disappointment. Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded in 1863, nearly 20 years after the Millerite movement. Ellen White had her first vision 30 days after the Great Disappointment. She was probably 13, 14 years old. Well, I take that back. She was a little older than that. When she first started attending the Millerite meeting, she was around 13 or 14 years old. I'm not sure exact age when she had her first vision, but the math will figure that out pretty quickly. But anyway, irregardless, Ellen White was kind of obviously a founder with others of the Seventh-day Adventist organization nearly 20 years after the Millerite movement. John the Revelator predicted that movement, or predicted that disappointment when he said you'd put it in your mouth, it'd be sweet as honey, and it would turn bitter in your belly, for ye must prophesy again. October the 22nd, 1844 was the right event. It was the right date. It was the wrong event, which we'll get into something called investigated judgment, but I'm not going to get into it today. But when you get pumped up, and I just want to state for the record, there's never been a reputable Seventh-day Adventist pastor that I know of that set any date of Christ coming. We don't set dates for Christ coming. In fact, many of our pastors subscribed that 1798 was the last dated prophecy. And of course, the 1844 movement, that prophecy was prior to that, but the woman being in the wilderness 1260 years, so the 1798 date's the last time prophecy the Adventists adhere to in the Bible. No Adventist is set an exact date after that. But as the world gets progressively worse, gets progressively more evil, I've said I expect the Lord to return in the next 10 years. And I've said that 3 or 4 times in my faith experience. Just because he don't come doesn't mean I've lost faith that he's going to come. I still believe he's going to come. And I'll again say I expect him here within the next 8 to 10 years. I just think the coming is that close, and the signs of the times is just that more imminent. And it's close even at the door. But there is some Adventists out there that each and every time that they preach this message and they get people ramped up and they get people excited and the Lord doesn't come, some Adventists has lost a little faith and down a little bit, and they just really don't want to preach the Revelation message. They just kind of want to preach God's love, and and they want to talk about the other 64 books in the Bible, and they really just kind of leave Daniel and Revelation alone. And then, as I said, I want to look this name up. I believe it's Desmond Ford. I have to look this up here. I believe it's on the Wikipedia website. And, okay, it is the guy that I named. I'm not going to get too far into the investigative judgment doctrine, because I've talked about it other days, and I'll talk about it again in the future. But so it suffices for today just to say that there was a controversy within the denomination in 1980 and this would have been a year after my daughter was born. In fact, my daughter was born in 1979, and this controversy came 1 year later. And it's when the Adventist theologian Desmond Ford had his ministerial credentials withdrawn by the church after openly criticizing the doctrine. While Adventist mainstream belief in the doctrine and the church has reaffirmed its basic position on the doctrine since 1980, some of those within the church's more liberal progressive wing continue to be critical of the teaching. So this may, liberal wing, this could be some of the coastal churches, this could be some of the Texas churches, the California churches, the New York churches. Some of these churches have become a little liberal on the teaching. Anybody that I know in the Bible Belt, the Midwest, pretty much still adheres to the investigative judgment doctrine. That doctrine it's unique as an SDA doctrine, but according to a 2002 worldwide survey, local church leaders estimate 86% of church members accept the doctrine, and 35% believe there may be more than one interpretation of the sanctuary belief. So it's split about and 86 and 35 don't equal 100. So I would suggest to you about 7 out of 10 Adventists still adhere to the doctrine, and there may be 30% out there that are kind of trying to distance themselves from the doctrine. Okay? Mrs. White prophesied it. Mrs. White talked about a shaking. John the Revelator talks about a shaking, talk about a sifting, talking about members of the church who would be shaken out. Do you think the verse is going to get discouraged because there's been some members shaken out of the Adventist church? Do you think the verse is going to get discouraged because I see some apostate Seventh-day Adventist pastors who weren't really Seventh-day Adventist pastors to start with? They were wolves in sheep's clothing planted in the church for the exact purpose of apostatizing from the church. Do you think this is going to discourage the verse? You don't know the verse well then. I told another radio host on another radio program one time, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church makes a doctrine over all 66 books in the Bible. We don't ignore one book in the Bible. Calvinist Presbyterian teaching, although, has made a doctrine out of the book of Romans and the book of Ephesians. Seventh-day Adventist Church makes a doctrine out of all 66 books in the Bible. There's no one book more important, less important than the other one. But I would say to you without a doubt, if it weren't for the book of Hebrews, I would most likely be just a regular, average Sunday-keeping Christian. Okay? It's the book of Hebrews that lays out the invite still open in Hebrews 4:1 through 11. It lays out that the invite to enter God's rest is still open, and it's still open to anybody out there who wants to accept that rest. And it warns us in Hebrews 4:1 through 11 not to fall after the same example of unbelief as those who were originally given that ability to rest, and that was God's people, Israel. I mean, obviously, the people before the flood kept the Sabbath because, why? Because that's the day Adam was born on. So naturally, they wouldn't have forgot. I mean, Adam was alive 930 years. I think there was, I think simultaneously, what was there, 5 to 8 generations alive at the same time? Who could deny the story of Adam's birthday? Duh. It'd be like forgetting your daughter's birthday, your son's birthday. It'd be like the daughter or son forgetting your birthday as a dad or a mom. They're not going to forget your birthday. And as long as Adam was alive, the Garden of Eden still stood, and the angels still guarded the entrance and the exit. Who could deny the story that Adam and Eve was kicked out of the garden when they could literally see the garden? And how many times did Adam tell and retell the story of his creation? And every 7th day, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In essence, God rested from his work, so every 7 days he knew it was his birthday. And then God reminded the children of Israel when he was bringing them out of Egypt and wanted to take them into the promised land to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So he reminded them of something that already existed. It's like your wife puts a note on the refrigerator and says, hey, hub, don't forget that dental appointment. The dental appointment had to exist before the reminder. Had to exist before the reminder. The Sabbath existed before the reminder. And Isaiah 66, 22 and 23 says, from one new moon to the next, we'll keep the Sabbath in heaven and the new earth. It's eternal. What's your excuse for not keeping it? It's eternal. But how could you deny the story when Adam was alive? How could you deny the story when you could see where the Garden of Eden was that Adam got kicked out of and witness the 2 angels guarding the entrance and the exit? Pretty hard to deny the story. And who would have not known when the father of mankind's birthday was? It was every Saturday, in essence. We're celebrating the 2nd anniversary of Adam's creation, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 100th, the 500th, the 10 millionth, whatever. Every week is a celebration of Adam's birthday. His birthday comes once every week instead of once a year. His birthday is once a week. So you have a bunch of apostate Adventist pastors and Adventist lay people who've walked away from the church, fallen away. Well, likely they weren't grounded in anyway. Likely they were plants anyway. But on the few rare occasions that somebody may actually have doubt, well, we all have doubts, brother. There's SDA pastors is out preaching a different doctrine. There's some who, like Ryan J. Bell, who become an atheist. But you know what? None of these guys were brainwashed. None of these guys were brainwashed into a cult. None of them was brainwashed to believe a false prophet. There was no Kool-Aid applied to believe anything. You're free to study what you want, and you're free not to study what you want. You want to put something in the offering plate, you're free. If you're not, you're free. Partake in communion, you can partake. If you don't, you don't. Nobody is coercing anyone to do anything inside the doors of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So when I have read and I have studied on my own accord for the last 20 years Ellen White's writings, nobody was giving me Kool-Aid to drink at the time, and no one was forcing me to do it. Do you really think that I'm ever going to apostate away from Ellen White? What she's written, the counsel she's written? Does anybody think I'm ever going to apostate away from this church? Well, you better think twice, friend. They called Christ a lunatic. They called him a madman. They called him delusional. They called him a winebibber. They called him a false prophet. Called him a bastard. People still hold today that he had sexual relations with Mary Magdalene, has children by her. They're out trying to find the descendants of Jesus. They're out trying to find the DNA of Jesus. But without Hebrews 4, I'd be just an average Sunday keeper in some denomination. I don't know where, but I'd just be an average Sunday keeper in some denomination. It'd be Protestant. But Hebrews 4, 1 through 11 offers the invitation. It's an open invite. It's a promise being left. It's a promise yet fulfilled. God has not filled his house. And not to fall after the same example of unbelief as the people it was first offered to. So, I got some Christian news articles I'm going to get to here. Really didn't plan on talking about this, but words you hear are the words of a man convicted. Not a man that's been brainwashed, not a man that's delusional, not a man that has drank the Kool-Aid. Somebody of my own free will and accord picked up the books, and when what I read registered as truth, I was convicted. And each sentence, each word that kept convicting me of truth became truth. Because it spoke exactly according to the Word of God. Ellen White's writings don't deter one iota off the Word of God. You want a reader? Read her. You want to be a Seventh-day Adventist without ever reading her? More power to you. But her message was for the end-day people who are going to face persecution, face events, turmoil, Jacob's time of trouble. They are going to face events on this earth like they've never faced before. Is every Protestant church in the city of Des Moines preaching that? No. Because I know many of them aren't. Oh, they're all millennialists. Woo-hee. I think the kingdom age is going on right now, and if they can just take over the media and they can just take over the 7 mountains of dominion, they're going to take this world back and they're going to clean them off a chair, clean enough in the cesspool for Jesus to come and sit down and be the Savior of the world. Horse honky, friend. Our job is to evangelize the world, not Christianize it. You ain't going to make this place good enough for God to return. In fact, the cup of iniquity's got to fill so fast that God's got to come for the sake of the elect. So I will hit our SRN news, and we'll be back after the hour, and we're going to get into some Christian news stories, and we're going to get into some Sabbath school lesson. And the Sabbath school lesson for today is the 70 weeks and the 2,300 days. And I'm going to get my SRN, pardon me.
KPOG 102.9 FM, Grimes.
With SRN News, I'm Ron DeRockstra. Rudy Giuliani's notified lawmakers he will not comply with a subpoena issued by 3 House committees. That subpoena had been issued to President Trump's personal attorney September 30th for documents related to his work in Ukraine. Giuliani has until Wednesday to provide those documents. A letter sent by attorney John Sales says the subpoena is overbroad, unduly burdensome, and seeks documents beyond the scope of legitimate inquiry. Sale also echoed a letter from the White House counsel's office describing the impeachment inquiry itself as unconstitutional and baseless. Congressional Republicans want Congressman Adam Schiff to publicly release transcripts of the latest round of depositions made to the House Intelligence Committee. Speaking with Salem Radio, Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise condemns what he describes as the House Democrat efforts to overturn the 2016 election and adversely impact the upcoming 2020.
Shouldn't the people of this country decide the next presidential election, not Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff in some private secret rooms where they're hiding their little made up witch hunts from the rest of the country, and they think they're going to choose the next president.
Fiona Hill, a former top national security expert on Russia, testified to Congress behind closed doors on Monday. Also at srnnews.com, the Senate continues to move forward on the president's goal of confirming conservative judges to the federal courts.
The Senate is already moving toward confirmation of 4 more district judges this week. First up is Frank Volk for the Southern District of West Virginia, Charles Eskridge for the Southern District of Texas, David Novak to the Eastern District of Virginia, and Rachel Kovner for the Eastern District of New York. Even as the House and much of the media is focused on impeachment, the GOP-led Senate is helping the president with his goal of placing constitutionally minded judges on the federal courts. Bob Agnew reporting.
This is SRN News. The NBA is catching some red-hot heat from a Southern Baptist leader who says they are kowtowing to China after boycotting North Carolina over its transgender bathroom law.
It costs the NBA, team owners, players, managers, and others virtually nothing to make whatever trenchant criticisms and political points they want to make within the United States about the United States.
That's Dr. Albert Mohler.
Over and over again, they've said we have to make moral judgments. Except in China, their moral judgment, in the face of its human rights abuses, looking into the camera and saying, I love China.
Mohler has more to say in his daily briefing at albertmohler.com. Other Democratic presidential candidates are distancing themselves from Beto O'Rourke's determination to strip the tax-exempt status of churches that refuse to embrace homosexuality. Elizabeth Warren says she would not take action against religious entities that decline to perform same-sex marriages. This is SRN News. There could be a shred of light to ending a month-long strike against General Motors.
A person briefed on the contract talk says GM CEO Mary Barra is joining negotiators at the bargaining table, along with company president Mark Royce. The individual who spoke confidentially says both executives were in the room early Tuesday. About 49,000 UAW members walked off the job September 16th after their 4-year contract expired. The strike has shut down all of GM's U.S. factories and has hampered production in Canada and Mexico. Rich Thomason reporting.
A California man's been sentenced by a Florida judge to 25 years in prison for orchestrating a $1.3 billion fraud scheme that stole money from at least 7,000 investors nationwide. Court records show the 61-year-old was sentenced in federal court after previously pleading guilty to mail and wire fraud and tax evasion. More details at srnnews.com. I'm Ron DeRockstra.
Hang on here a second.
KPOG 102.9 FM, Grimes.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Matthew 5:9.
Every weekday on the Power of God, KPOG 102.9 FM, and live on webcast1live.com. Join us for a view from the pew. Should you be offended, provoked, triggered, intimidated, shocked, confused, or inspired to think independently, call our studio lines at 515-442-KPOG and join the conversation. After all, it's your voice we want to hear. The View from the Pew on KPOG and webcast1live.com. Weekdays from 4 to 6 on the Power of God.
Now, here's today's host, Frank the Verse Thomas.
Sorry for that. I was trying to keep an eye on some stuff on Twitter and Facebook, and got a little delayed, and SRN News ran out on me. So we're back. That's the important thing. As Mac used to say, we're transparent here. You hear all the warts and the flaws and the whole 9 yards when you tune into this program. And I hope that makes it a better experience. I hope that makes it a more powerful experience, because it's not slick and polished. I'm one man out here. I'm subject to failure just like you and anyone else. I have good days, I have bad days, but I'm walking the walk that I'm trying to talk. I'm seeking to be not only a hearer of the word, but a doer of the word. I'm probably better at that at this point in my life than I've ever been. But you're going to see all the warts and flaws here. I'm doing this by myself. I operate 2 computers, and I got a lot of things going on, and I don't have a producer because I am the producer. And so what I look up, I have to type in and look up, and I'll just be honest with you. I'm a 1-finger, 2-finger typist at best. And so what happens on this show is what happens on this show. But whatever happens, you can guarantee one thing. This passion, this fire, whatever I breathe on this station is from conviction of my heart. So you can have a lot of people that can come in and just lay down some time and blah, blah, blah. But I'll promise you that's not me. So if you would like to contact the show, you can do so by...
We want to hear from you. So give us a call on the Service Legends Talk and Text line, 515-442-5764. That's 515-442-KPOG.
And we do our show here every Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. here at Jordan Crossing Church. Let me set that down. I think I'm done with. That. I don't think I have anything else I want on there, so I'm gonna get over. All right, I have a few Christian news stories here that I want to present to you. I'm going to go through a lot of these fairly quick because I don't have a lot of time to spend on these since I went on that diatribe the first hour. All right, so these are as I say, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. A baby is born while still inside the amniotic sac. Amazing photos. Incredible footage captures from the moment the baby in China was pulled from his mother's womb while still intact the amniotic sac. The baby who was delivered in July via C-section at 36 weeks gestation, was in the breech position and had an umbilical cord complication that made the early birth necessary. Breech, I believe, is the way my daughter was born. She had to be turned. But breech, from my knowledge, is face up. And that's not the way you're supposed to be coming out of the womb. You're supposed to come out of the womb face down. And so that can create some complications. But 36 weeks. How do you deny that this is a child? How do you deny that this is just an unviable tissue mass? Here's a story, an ex-gay advocate. I thought God didn't care when I was repeatedly being molested, and I was wrong. This is a story by Dr. David Kyle Foster. After being repeatedly molested as a child. Oh, this is Joe Dallas, and we've actually met Joe Dallas and interviewed Joe Dallas at another radio network. Joe Dallas was repeatedly molested as a child. He entered the gay lifestyle. He tells Dr. David Kyle Foster that he began doing pornography as early as elementary school. After I was molested, I thought God was watching. I didn't think he cared. I was hoping that if I could get his attention, maybe he would notice me and do something and either put me in a more loving environment or give me the strength to say no, or somehow race me through my childhood to skip the years where I could be on my own. He even Joe Dallas became a gay activist and became an activist in the gay church, churches that affirm homosexual behavior. But in that dark place, God opened his eyes to the false prophet he was believing, the false gospel he was believing. All the time, a nagging voice kept saying, "You're kidding yourself." And I would shove that down, and I wanted to do that until January of 1984. God very quietly was convicting and drawing me back because I was hungry and restless. So, I heard Joe talk, and Joe makes no bones about it that there's times when he's tempted by that lifestyle. He still has temptations occasionally. But the main point was he thought God didn't care. And he found out different that God does care. So, hallelujah. Here's a story. Florida makes bold move to require schools to teach human trafficking prevention. In a bold move this month, Florida's Board of Education unanimously voted to require schools to teach human trafficking prevention in all K through 12. Governor Ron DeSantis commented, "Tragically, human trafficking is an epidemic in our country. Children of all ages need to know and understand the hazards of human trafficking and how to protect themselves from dangerous predators." So that's again, I think, I mean, I wished we lived in a perfect world where we didn't have to do that. I wished we lived in a world where we didn't have to warn our children at a young age that there's people out to do them evil. But this life doesn't afford us that opportunity, so we have to expose our kids to things prematurely that we really don't want to expose them to. Here's a health-related story saying that breakthrough. Researchers say they found a diabetes cure. This is a new way to treat diabetes. Today you only have ways to manage the disease. This is a cure. The diabetic pancreas has lost the function of secreting insulin, and we give it back. The patient should never have to inject insulin in his body again. Now, is this for type 1 or type 2? The new mode of treatment involves implanting a bio-artificial pancreas under the skin using local anesthesia during an outpatient procedure, which would not only help monitor blood sugar levels but also detect. So, cure diabetes where you don't have to take shots. Hey, again, cool story, positive, amen. Again, these are kind of some shorter stories, which is, it's fine. But we've done several stories and several follow-up stories. Well, here's another follow-up story on Alex Trebek. Alex Trebek has cancer setback. I'm nearing the end of my life. Alex Trebek is obviously, as you know, the Jeopardy host. And he attributed prayer for bringing him close to remission from stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and he told a Canadian news program he's nearing the end of his life. I've lived a full life, a good life. I'm nearing the end of that life, he told anchor Lisa Laflamme. I don't know how. Not a French person. Not going to delude myself. If it happens, it happens, and why should I be afraid of that? The latest update from doctors prompted him to drop immunotherapy, which he said did diddly squat, and immunotherapy, and to return to an aggressive form of chemotherapy. We'll see if the numbers go down, but he said they can't keep doing it forever. So, Alex Trebek. Everybody knows old Alex if you've seen any daytime TV. And I have a couple more stories that I want to get a little lengthy into, so this is why I'm kind of blowing through some of these others that really don't demand a lot of comment. And this one likely is in that realm a little bit, but a watchdog group finds that there's a major increase in TV profanity and violence and says Congress should act. I believe I have read child sees on TV by 18. All right. I think I gave you this before. In a 65-year life, a person will have spent in that 65 years, 9 years glued to the TV. By the time a child reaches the age of 18, they have witnessed roughly 200,000 acts of violence and 16,000 murders on TV by the time they're 18. And those acts of violence can be assault, rapes, robberies, different types of things, but 200,000 acts of violence and 16,000 murders. And that's probably a low ball. If you want to be honest about it, that's a low ball. But a new study has a message for families who said television content has been growing coarser. Well, one thing, if you watch anything on FX, I mean, it's F-bombs, I mean, this is obviously cable TV. But it's slang for genitalia, it's slang for sex, you ain't watching R-rated movies and you're not watching X-rated porn, but it's getting pretty darn close on some of the FX television shows, particularly FX. And it's just what the Parental Television Council calls content creep. It just gets a little worse and a little worse and a little worse, and all of a sudden you go, man, are you kidding me? They're saying that on TV? I mean, many of you will remember Saturday Night Live, and you remember John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Jane Curtin, Gilda Radner. You remember that original group of Saturday Night Live. It was a cutting-edge program. Well, you remember kind of a crossfire between Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd. And I'll be PC here, obviously, because I won't, I'm not silly enough to say something like that on the air, but Dan and Jane would take the opposite point of view on a given issue. And Jane would make a point, and Dan would retort, Jane, you ignorant female slang. And if you heard it, you know what I'm speaking of, but that was cutting edge. You didn't hear words like that on TV in the 1960s. You didn't hear words like that on Bonanza. You didn't hear words like that on the old Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy. In fact, Lucy and Ricky didn't even sleep in the same bed. It wasn't until the Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch was the first cutting-edge TV program where Mike and, what was her name, Linda Brady? I can't even remember what Mrs. Brady's name was, but they actually were in the same bed in pajamas. And then, of course, you find out later on that Mike Brady was really in real life a homosexual. But over the years, they took more liberty with TV, more liberty with TV, more liberty with TV. Now, back in the old days, they used to say in the movies that a man and a woman couldn't be in the same bed. I Dream of Jeannie, you remember that old 60s show? I Dream of Jeannie had to have her belly button covered up. Same thing for Marianne on Gilligan's Island. You remember she used to wear the shorts and the tied-up shirt at the waist, but her belly button didn't show. I Dream of Jeannie's belly button didn't show. Back in the days, the censors, if you was a man and a woman was in the same bed, that could only be possible if the movie or the TV show was showing a man with at least 1 foot on the floor. Means he wasn't all in. He wasn't all in the bed. Of course, he had his clothes on, and he had a foot on the floor, so, but the soap operas started getting a little more risque and showing men and women in provocative situations, and things started getting a little more coarse and a little more coarse, and the language gets a little more coarse, and now you turn on some cable TV shows and even some broadcast NBC, ABC, CBS network shows, you see some pretty rough stuff. But when Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin, and Dan would retort to you, you ignorant female slang. That was cutting edge. And it's just went downhill from there. Until the point now where it says a new study shows the message for families has grown coarser and coarser and coarser each passing year. The study by Watchdog Group found that 28% increase in violence and a 44% increase in profanity over the past decade in shows rated PG. PG, this is parental consent now. This isn't R-rated, this is PG. It's like you let your kids watch something and it's hard telling what they're going to see. And there is some there's some shows out there that, some biker shows, some bike gang shows. There's been they're Mayans. I think there's currently a Mayans, but there was a let me see if I can find it. See if I can find this. Sons of Anarchy was the one I'm thinking of. But it's the Mayans. It's the one that's going on currently right now. But Sons of Anarchy ran from 2008 to 2014, and boy, they pumped up the volume in that. And I haven't watched any of this Mayans deal. Not interested. I really didn't even care for Sons of Anarchy. Didn't watch it. Obviously I surfed through and seen clips and scenes, but never got interested in it. But these type of TV shows, and they are generally FX TV shows. They're crime dramas, shows with dirty cops, etc., etc. Then you remember, obviously, The Sopranos. That was an HBO show. But these shows just got increasingly, we're not talking HBO, we're talking cable TV. And the stuff is more and more violence and more profanity. So, what do you do? What do you do as a parent? Well, you got to start talking to your kids, because if you ain't talking to them, they're learning the stuff from somewhere else. So you better start talking. Let's see. What does it mean if you're dreaming about predatory animals? When Sean Boltz and his ministry moved to LA, they began dreaming about little spiders. Even their children started having similar dreams of tiny spiders, but no one knew what it meant. Soon the spiders moved from dreams to reality. Boltz recounts the team having spiders run across their laps while they were resting at home. And there aren't a lot of spiders in California, he said. The dreams started getting more intense. The spiders were replaced by wolf spiders. They were replaced by black widows and brown recluses. One team member was bitten by a brown recluse shortly after dreaming about that type of spider. So, what's it mean? All dreams would act as a warning. Hey, prepare yourself, fight, put on the armor of God, do everything you can to stand rightly in the heart and walk with God in this season, because the enemy is trying to set you up. So, obviously, if you're being chased, if you're being pursued, if you do these sort of things, then generally you might think it's like Satan seeking to sift you as wheat, like the roaring lion. walking about looking who he may devour. Let's see, I have two more stories here, and we're going to get into Sabbath school. Says, I listened to your show in stereo, and I'm only hearing you in mono, no sound on the right speaker. I've checked my equipment a couple of times, and it's not on my end. So, not sure what that's all about. I'm showing it running in two channels. The main's running in two channels, and they're working equally, so I'm not quite sure. It might be something that Bob's in. I'll mention it. If Brian's listening. Hey, Brian, are you listening there, buddy? Show only in mono, no stereo. I'll send that message on to Brian, see what he has to say. And he can look into that and see what's going on. I can't really tell anything on my end. Like I say, it looks as both the left and right channel on the mains is going out in stereo, but that doesn't mean that that's the way it's going out on radio. It might be something on Bob's end. Okay, why the NBA and so many other companies caves to China and corporate dehumanization? Well, I listened to an interesting, he's a kind of a heavy-set, bald, black man. I believe he speaks on some of these sports-related shows on Fox Sports. But he comes on Tucker Carlson quite a bit, and he just says, Tucker, I'm going to lay this out for you. The reason why there's this flap going on with China and the NBA and all this kind of stuff. He says Nike tennis shoes, Nike sneakers, Nike tennis shoes owns the NBA. And he doesn't mean that literally, but figuratively. Nike owns NBA. Nike wants into the China market because China has 1 billion people in China, and that's a lot of selling tennis shoes. So you got basketball coaches in the NBA who refuse to speak out against the human rights violations of China, but at the same time want to blast our president, blast our country for the splinters in our eye, while China's got a log in theirs, and they refuse to even acknowledge the log in China's eye because they're too busy trying to charm China and take China's money. And furthermore, this guy said that Barack Obama went to Nike headquarters and talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And of course, this would make it easier for Nike to sell tennis shoes and sneakers in China. And of course, China is fascinated with the NBA, fascinated with the dunks and the talent and the jumping ability and the speed of the game. And Chinamen are a little smaller in stature on the average than the American National Basketball Association players. So it's kind of height envy. Everyone would like to be a little taller, especially if you're an Asian that's of a little shorter persuasion. But, of course, also, Donald Trump is in a trade negotiation with China. There's tariffs on imports into the country, and we're having a battle because we're trying to renegotiate our trade deal with China to make it more fair, because at the current time we're about a $600 billion a year trade deficit with China. So, to say the least, there's some NBA coaches out there that are very bitter and angry against the president. And the league is just, for the most part, trying to cover its butt. But the National Basketball League is figuratively owned by Nike. And if Nike says jump, the NBA says how high. Now, as you know, Barack Obama got into, or wanted to get into, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. And Donald Trump, of course, pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This isn't making Nike happy. So our corporations are trying to run our country by fueling, funding an impeachment against the President of the United States, so they can have their way, so that Nike, China, and the NBA can have their way. And they will look the other way at how much China pollutes the atmosphere, how much China pollutes the rivers and the water, and how much human rights abuses that China does against its own people, and how many people China keeps in work camps. They're one of the worst countries in the world, the most miserable countries in the world on human rights protection. This is basically why I don't even have to read the article, and I'm not going to read the article, because what this guy talked about on Tucker Carlson the other night was just basically the absolute truth. Nike says jump, NBA says how high. All right, so there's that story. Now here's the final story, and we're going to talk a little bit about, well, let me give you the headline of the article. Let me go back here. Where are you at? Okay. That article went away. Well, let me find this, see if I can. As you know, we had Columbus Day. But there's this big argument that we need to call it Indigenous Peoples Day. Because somehow there's certain people in the world who believe that the founding of America was both illegal and immoral. Now, why exactly they think, let me see, here's Brian saying something. Okay, Brian says, I was just in the car and you're coming through in stereo, same with the app. So, I don't know, maybe it's your head, your earbuds, I don't know. Brian says he's hearing it in stereo in his car, and same with the app, and he's going into AutoZone currently. So, I don't know. Check it out, not sure. Okay, oh, I didn't want to close that. Sorry. I need my Google text back. Where you at? Oh, here it is. Alright, I need my Google Hangouts. Alright, didn't mean to close that. Alright, so we're back to the, is it Columbus Day or is it Indigenous People Day? Everyone one is trying to argue that the founding of the United States of America was both illegal and immoral. I guess because of the way we treated the Native American people here. Did we treat them right? No. Was it necessary to shoot up all the buffalo and try to starve them out? No. Was it right to push them on to reservation after reservation? No. But the United States was prophesied by God. Prophesied in Revelation 13 as the beast of the lamb-like beast of the land. Lamb-like beast of the land, as opposed to the beast of the sea. Sea representing in prophecy nations, people, conquers people. So this new beast that would come up, this lamb-like beast with two horns, would not reconquer Europe again. You know how Europe was conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, then Cyrus, Medo-Persia, Alexander the Great, Greece, and then Rome. This new beast, lamb-like beast, lamb denoting innocence, lamb denoting religion, because Christ alone is called 28 times in Revelation the Lamb of God, or referred to as Lamb. So this lamb would represent innocence. This lamb would represent religious nation. What other nation in the world, can you say that would have rose up in this time frame and meet these definitions of what went on in where the first beast ended during the during the French Revolution, and this new lamb-like beast arising? It can only point to revolutionary France, and it can only point to the United States of America. So God designed for the United States to be a nation, and He blessed that nation as the religious, economic beacon of freedom to this world. And of course, that freedom of the world had to be protected by one of the toughest, baddest militaries in the world, and in a short 200 plus years of history, this nation has risen to the ranks of the #1 superpower in the world. Hands down. #1, and it's a nation of only 320 million people. #1, without a doubt, major superpowers in the world, followed by China and Russia. So the United States is not illegal and any immoral if God designed it to be founded. And he gave us this form of government, our Protestant representative republic, our participation and our ability to vote, our participation to have a say, that we're governed by, the government governs us by consent of the people. Okay? We're governed by the consent of the people. We don't like the government, we have the right to throw out the people who's governing us. This is the most successful experiment of government in the world. In world's history, it's the most successful form of government in world history. That could not happen without God's backing. So you can argue about Columbus. Is he a racist? Is Columbus this? Is Columbus that? I don't care. Now, some will argue that there were people who founded the United States before Columbus. I'm not even going to argue that. Don't care. It doesn't affect me. I'm not losing sleep over it. Now, did we treat The Native Americans, well, no. Did we engage in buying slaves? Yes. Slavery is something that it's a blight on society, but slavery has been since there's been the first war. Taking slaves is just part of the spoils of war. Was slavery right? No. But it's just a fact of life, and God says there will always be slaves. So, do we need to change Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day? No. Sorry, no. I'll tell you the answer, no. You want me to be blunt? No. Let's just have no days. Let's celebrate no days. Or let's celebrate every day. No days, every day. I just tire. I tire of the political correctness. I tire of the political correctness in life, trying to whitewash our history books, pull down our statues, take down our flags, change our history, because you can't change history, because if you don't know history, you can't possibly learn from history, and if you refuse to learn from history, you're doomed to make and repeat her mistakes. That's why we have history. That's why God allowed all the stink and the stank, the good, the bad, the ugly. He put it all in the Bible, and it's a lesson for mankind. Do this and don't do that. But if you're not told how stanky and dirty and skunky your history was and you whitewash it, how are you ever going to learn not to repeat its mistakes? So we got these politically correct children, buttercups, snowflakes on the college campuses that want to go around. We didn't whitewash the Bible. God did not whitewash David's sin against Bathsheba or with Bathsheba. He did not whitewash David's sin in killing Bathsheba's husband. He didn't whitewash Moses' sin. He didn't whitewash anybody's sin. That's why the Bible gives us these examples. He didn't whitewash Samson. He does not whitewash things. He gives you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's supposed to be so you learn from other people's mistakes and you learn from other people's successes. If we take all the nasty, ugly stuff out of the founding of the United States of America and we whitewash it, then we're going to make the same mistake down the road if the world lasts another 500 years, which it won't. But you can't purge history. You can't whitewash history. History is what it is. Paul said, if I don't know the law, I can't possibly know sin. Well, there's politically correct people that want to take the law of the Bible because it offends people. It offends the homosexual movement. It offends those who are having abortions. It offends those who are transgender. It offends those who want to sin. So let's take the Ten Commandments out the Bible. Let's take the law out the Bible. The law is irrelevant. Sorry. We can't whitewash history. We're not going to whitewash the Bible, and we're not going to whitewash history. All right, so as far as I'm concerned, thumbs up for Columbus Day, thumbs down for Indigenous People Day. It's just another effort to make something up silly. All right, so we're going to get to our lesson study. Here, and that is Tuesday. The 70 weeks and the 2,300 days. This is a pretty cut and dry lesson. It's pretty simple. I mean, you know, might be complicated for some, but I've seen it so many times. It's pretty simple. I want to read for you Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are determined about you and your people, your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint the most holy place. That's obviously from the ESV. King James would use the word determined. The word, quote, determined, found in Daniel 9:24, literally means 70 weeks are cut off. Although the word translated as determined is not used anywhere else in the Bible, it is found in Jewish literature, and it means cutting off from something longer. So if I give you a determined time frame that the train is leaving at 4 o'clock, that time is determined. It's cut off from the rest of the day. It leaves at 4 o'clock. So when something is determined, and we can look up on Google and definition for determined. Determined says having made a firm decision, being resolved not to change it, intent on, bent on, set on, dead set on, insistent on, fixed on. Processing or displaying resolve, resolute, full of determination, purposeful, purposive, and resolved. So when something is determined, it's fixed. It cannot be changed. It's fixed time. If I made the mistake one time, my dad said, who worked at the post office, I got a letter in the mail that my wife and I were going to take postal exams, and the time was, I believe, 14:30. And I thought it was a type error. 4:30. I thought it was 4:30. I didn't realize, had no idea they were talking about military time, like 0400, 0500, etc., etc. I didn't know they were taking time by military time. Had no idea. I just thought it was a type error or something. So I shows up down at the testing place at 4:30. Well, guess what? I didn't get to take the test. I guess it would be 1400, 14:30. It would be 2:30 in the afternoon. 12, 13, yeah, it'd be 2:30 in the afternoon. So we showed up 2 hours late. Didn't get to take the test. I think I later on took a test out at actually, I think we did take the test later on, I believe, at Valley High School. And I did believe that... Actually, I've passed a postal exam test twice and never got a job with the post office. So let's just put it that way. I passed one at the bulk mailing center. And I passed one for the post office, but military people get points added to their score, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 points, depending on if you're a combat veteran, depending on if you've been wounded in combat, etc., etc., etc. So ex-military people get preference in the post office. I never served in the military, was never wounded in the military, was never a prisoner of war in the military, so therefore I don't get these added points onto my score. So say you score a 75, I'm just making that up, but say you score a 75 and you get 5 points for being a veteran, that makes your score 80, and then you get 5 more for being in combat, so that gives you 85, and you get 5 more for being a prisoner of war. Well, you get more points added to your score. So fixed. Just keep that in mind, fixed. Fixed time. since Daniel 8 represents the 2300 year prophecy, or the 2300 year prophecy, whose starting point's not given in Daniel chapter 8, it logically follows that the next chapter, chapter 9, talks about 490 years as being determined or cut off. They could be cut off from the 2300 years. So the 70 weeks and in Bible prophecy, there's 7 days in a week, so it would be 70 times 7, which would be 490, so it would equal 490 years would be determined or cut off from this larger 2300 year prophecy. Okay? After all, what else could this period be cut off from but another and a longer time prophecy? So Daniel 8, 1 through 27, and I'll go through some of this. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after which appeared to me. At first I saw in a vision, when I saw Susa, the citadel, which was in the province of Elam, I saw in the vision. I raised my eyes and saw, behold, a ram standing at the back of the canal. It had 2 horns, and both horns were very high, and one higher than the other. And the higher one come up last, and I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue him from his power. So, Daniel is interpreting these visions. And he goes on to say, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. And there, behold, stood before me one having the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and called, Gabriel, make this man understand this vision. So he came near where I stood, and when I came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, that the vision is for the time of the end. So Daniel is seeing literally 2,300 years of Earth's history before his eyes. But the first 70 weeks of it, 490 years, is going to be determined on thy people, Daniel, and thy people, Daniel, is the Jews. It is not the Gentiles, so therefore this prophecy cannot, let me repeat, cannot refer to a modern prophecy, because Daniel's people would not have been the Gentiles. Daniel's people would not have been the uncircumcised Gentile, wouldn't have been the Greeks, wouldn't have been the Gentiles. Daniel's people were indeed the Jews, Israel. This is what puts the vision in the context of the time frame that it is supposed to be in, and most Bible prophecy teachers do not understand this principle. And when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face on the ground, but he touched me and made me stand up. Behold, I shall make known to you what shall be the end of the latter, for the indignation refers to the appointed time of the end. As for the ram that you saw, the 2 horns of the king of Medo-Persia, and the goats the king of Greece, and the great horn in his eyes of the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which the 4 arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from this nation, but not with his power. And goes on, and then it finishes by saying, and I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. Then I rose up and went about the king's business, and I was appalled by the vision, and I did not understand it. What was the one part that was given that was not explained? See Daniel 8:14. He said to me, for 2,000 evenings and mornings, and the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. In Daniel 8:26 and 27. And it refers to many days from now. So to determine that, a day to a year in Bible prophecy equals 2,300 years. Daniel didn't understand some of this. Okay, so there are many reasons the 70-week prophecy of Daniel and 2,300 evenings and mornings, the prophecy of 8:14, belong together. 1, both are time prophecies. 2, the specific time of the vision and the understanding links them to Daniel 8:26 to 27 and Daniel 9:23. Both interpretations of prophecy were given by Gabriel. See Daniel 8:16 and Daniel 9:21. Number 4, the only part of the vision not explained in Daniel chapter 8 was the vision about the 2300 evenings and mornings. Some were translated later as days. And then Daniel 8 contains the vision and partial interpretation, while Daniel 9 has an interpretation only. In this case of interpretation of the only part of Daniel chapter 8 not interpreted was the 2300-day prophecy of Daniel 8:14, the one part of the vision that Daniel had not understood. The information given to us in Ezra fills in the missing pieces of the prophecies predictions in the book of Daniel. So here's how it would go. Starting in 457 BC, 70 weeks would be determined on thy people, but halfway through the final week, the sacrifice and the oblation would be cut off. The 490 years starts from 457 BC, and taking into account that there was no 0 year, that's important, there was no 0 year, it went from 1 BC to 1 AD. So there was no 0 year. So taking into account the 0 year, the 490 years takes you to 27 BC. What happened in 27 BC? Jesus Christ, by all accounts, was baptized. So that final 1 week period, halfway through that week, in 31 AD, Jesus Christ was crucified, where the sacrifice and the oblation would cease. Then 3.5 years after that, Stephen was stoned in AD 34, which was the official, unofficial kickoff of the gospel going to the Gentiles, because the children of Israel have basically apostatized away from God. That leaves us with an additional 810 years. What happened in that additional 810 years? Well, there is a smaller prophecy contained in that, of the woman being chased in the wilderness for 1260 years, which would start in approximately AD 538 and would run to AD 1798, when Pope Pius the Sixth received the deadly wound, because he was taken into captivity by Napoleon's general Berthier in 1798. Then the rest of the time of the 2300 years would end in AD 1844, and that's when William Miller, I believe they started out with the date of 1843, but I think they had to recalculate their time because of no 0 year. Focus on that. And they had to obviously account for the fact that they had it lined up with in the Passover in the spring of the year in 1844, but their calculations were later revised, and it got it to, in the fall of the year, you have the Feast of Trumpets. Starts about the beginning of October. The 10 days before Atonement. Atonement would be on I believe the 15th of the month. And then the Feast of Tabernacles would start after that, and it would be celebrated 7 days inside of Jerusalem and 8 days outside of Jerusalem. So 15 and 7 is 22. That's where they arrived at the date of October the 22nd, 1844. And the Great Disappointment. Well, clearly Mrs. White said the mathematics was spot on. Right date, wrong event. It was not the return of Jesus, but ye must prophesy again. And in 1844, it was sweet in their mouth as honey and turned bitter in their belly, and ye must prophesy again. So this is Frank the Verse Thomas here at View from the Pew, and we will pick this up tomorrow, and we will see you. And until then, I will leave you with, get my card.
KPOG 102.9 FM, Grimes.